Do you ever slump when you're meditating or when you're just sitting around having a conversation, sitting in front of the computer? That's a favorite place that a lot of people slump. Well, in this video, what I'm going to do is give you some tools to notice how that happens for you, specifically for you, not some other person, and how we can use that awareness to create a vital new posture that can support you, again, in meditation, but just in upright sitting or standing in any activity you might be engaged in. Hi, my name is Seth Dellinger. I am a Feldenkrais practitioner in Washington, D.C. I also have a daily meditation practice. And so this video I'm actually including in my series on creative tools for meditation. But if you're not a person who meditates, stick around. This is going to help you with your posture either way. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to actually do this in standing. So again, if you meditate, you may or may not have a standing meditation, but I think for this particular process, standing is very useful. But I'll also just let you know that you could sit at the front edge of a chair for this with your feet firmly planted on the ground, and you could follow along what I'm going to demonstrate here in standing, and it will work for you as well. Okay, so the process is pretty simple, but what we're going to do, we're going to work with for a while and layer on some different nuances. So here I am, I'm standing, and let's just say this feels pretty good. I'm not sure, but I want to feel, what would it be like for me to be really tall? Now, I don't want to rigidify and do some, kind of performed idea of good posture, but I'm just going to think about my head like it was a balloon that was floating upwards. Right? Just understanding that my head could sit on top of my spine in different ways, and I'm looking for the idea that it's really at the highest possible point. So I'm not trying to make perfect posture here, but I'm just trying to find a beginning place that feels comfortable for me. I'm going to pay attention to the weight over my left and right legs, and I'm just going to look for something that more or less feels symmetrical, just so that I have this as sort of a baseline. Okay, so let's just call this standing upright. Okay, so I'm going to stand upright, and now I'm just simply going to slump. I'm going to pretend it's like the end of one of those long, hard days. I just can't really keep myself up anymore. I'm not actually sitting down, but I just kind of let go, right? And I slump. Okay, and then I'm going to come back up to where I began. Think of the head floating up into a sort of a taller, more comfortable posture. Okay, so what I just showed you is the basis for everything we're going to do after this. But what's important is we don't want to sort of like slump too violently, because in fact, when we slump, the postures we go into are the source often of discomfort or even injury when we really live in those habits. And what we're trying to do here is discover what those habits are, but we don't want to do anything that's not going to be in service of learning. So now I'm going to ask you to go from this position to slumping, but just think of slumping like 5%. So if I slump right here, I don't know if you can see it, but I already feel like I've lost some of my support. But just think of your head sort of falling off the spine a little bit. And I'm going to go a little bit more just so you can really see me, but even what I'm doing, you don't have to do quite as much. And then I'm going to straighten up. And I'm going to keep doing this a little bit. And if you're following along, you're going to keep doing it. You just slowly slump and then slowly come back to a more upright, balanced standing. But now, the most important thing, we're going to begin a process of observation, right? So when my head sort of falls off the top of my spine, how does it do that? My head falls forward, right? It could fall back, but that's not what I tend to do. So I'm finding out my head falls forward and it actually falls a little down to the right. When I slump a bit, I find that I'm looking down towards the floor to my right. Okay? And so, of course, to come back up, I'm going to be turning a little to the left to come back to this upright standing. And let's also say that upright standing, you're sort of looking out at the horizon, looking at eye level. But then again, I slump, my head falls forward a little to the right, and now I'm noticing also my right ear has gone a little lower than my left ear, so there's a tilting that I'm doing as well. Okay? So notice when your head falls, which direction does it fall? Is there a turning? In other words, a rotational movement, and is there a tilting movement? Does one ear go lower? And if that's the case, probably something similar is happening in the chest. So my breastbone, as I slump, it's also moving to the right. It's also moving to the right. Okay, so just keep doing this and begin to make observations about these particular qualities. Now, I also said we'd like to begin as best we can, maybe not perfect, but like 50-50 distribution of the weight over the feet. But when I slump, I actually find my weight is going a little to the left. I'm turning my body to orient towards the right, but I've sort of sunk down onto my left leg. And actually, I don't know if you can see it, but my left knee is bending a little bit. And right here, where I'm in this slumped posture, if I was to try to lift one foot off the ground, I could lift the right leg, no problem. But to lift the left leg, I'm really falling down into my left leg. So it's very heavy right now. So what we're starting to notice is when and we do this unconsciously most of the time, right? When we go into that slumped place, we've compromised our movement. I can lift again the right leg, but not so much the left. And I'm already sort of turned to the right. So if something happens off to the left, I'm going to be kind of stuck for going over there. So one of the important things here to realize is that posture, it's not just a position, but it's a sense of your readiness. Are you ready to go here? Are you ready to go there? Okay, so again, as you sort of let the head fall off the spine, you want to maybe notice if the head turns or tilts. What is the chest doing? You might notice with the shoulders. Here, okay, my left shoulder's a little forward and my right shoulder's a little further back. And in fact, it feels like my left shoulder's higher up off the ground. So the shoulders, their movement, it also suggests something that's happening through the ribs. Right? So if you think of the distance from your armpit down to the top of your pelvis on each side, and maybe those distances are more or less the same in the beginning, what happens when you slump? So let's see what happens for me. Yeah, so I'm noticing the ribs in my right armpit, they're really squeezed together, and I can sense the overall length from my right armpit down to the top of my pelvis on the right side. It has shortened. On the left side, I actually feel a little longer. Okay? So all of these changes in position are really impacting me, and I can start to notice, again, as I slump, oh, I can feel my left side lengthening, or I can feel that contraction in the right armpit. I can feel the turning. I can notice the weight shifting. So I start to notice the really particular aspects of what's happening. And as I go from the slumped position back up, I'm noticing what's that movement of correction. Now for you, your head might be falling a little back, or it might be falling to the left instead of the right. That's fine. You're looking for finding out what is the particular thing that happens to you. Now this is important particularly for meditation. Before slumping, just tune into your breathing. So draw in a few breaths of air and sort of track the internal movement of your breath. Where do you expand? Is it more in the chest? Is it more down in the belly? And do you have any tendency to find more expansion, more movement in the ribs, maybe, on one side of the body? So notice how the breath moves, and now slump. And what's the breathing like here? For me, there's almost no capacity to expand in the left side of my chest. There's ways that I've folded and compressed the right side, but somehow there's more space here. So when I'm slumped, I feel that most of my breath is coming in through this side. Okay? And then when I come back out of it, okay, I can expand in more places now. So this is a sort of a preliminary sense of how do I slump, right? And if I want to catch myself slumping, just knowing what the pattern is going to help. I feel myself doing this thing, right? Now, here's another interesting thing. I'm sort of wired up here, so I'm not going to go very far. But you can take this experiment into walking. So if I just come to that baseline standing, I'll just walk towards the camera a little bit. And I feel what that's like, right? And I can do that, for a little while. Notice Is there a rhythm where I seem to put more of an accent on one foot, something like that? Okay? But then what if I were to slump and sort of remain in this sort of turned, tilted, whatever you want to call it, the slumped position, and now when I walk, yeah, very different. You can see I kind of have a limp, and I'm noticing, again, really heavy on the left foot, right? So this is just giving me more information about how I do it. Okay, so this is the first part of our process of kind of learning what is your slumping pattern, and therefore what would it mean to come up and out of that pattern. Again, you could be sitting on a chair, so if you were sitting on the front edge of a chair and you kind of slumped, you might notice that you shift over onto one of your sit bones more than the other, something like that. Same idea, and you can do this on your meditation cushion. But now let's add something new. So I've already figured out that when I slump, I sort of turn to the right, I tilt, I'm noticing something with my left knee, I'm noticing where my weight goes. Now suppose you were in a movie and you were an actor and you were playing the role of a person who also has particular habits of posture, but they're not yours. And in fact, this person has the opposite pattern of slumping from what you do. And so it might take a minute to sort of put it together, but rather than slumping and turning and kind of looking down to the floor to the right, now I'm going to slump down to the left. And of course, you're going to slump down, and then you're going to come back up. And again, just remember to keep it very small. You don't want to put yourself into some relationship with your joints that is really painful. But slumping is something we all do in those moments when we're tired or when we're like deflated because something emotional that's going on. So now to slump in a way that you never do slump, it's gonna feel strange, but you're also, in a funny way, you're giving your nervous system information it basically never gets, because I don't slump this way. But now I'm turning and I'm letting my weight shift to the other side a little bit. There's a lot of details that we notice. So maybe you don't have perfectly the exact same or the exact opposite of a slump, but you go into this other kind of slumping and you come up, right? And just, again, notice, maybe pick just the head. The head turns and tilts the opposite way, but then see what wants to happen with the movement of the pelvis through space. My pelvis goes over to this side, and now my weight's over here. You can pick different ways of doing it, but just make up a way of slumping that isn't your normal way. And in the same way, study it. Notice if you stay in that slumping position, how do you breathe? Yeah, now I can breathe on my left side, whereas in my normal slumping pattern over here, I really couldn't get a breath on the left. So you notice, oh, this is really different, right? And then you can start slumping in your old sort of pattern, and then coming up and slumping in the secondary pattern and coming up. And now you're starting to do something really interesting and dynamic, and you might notice every time you come up to the baseline, sort of a taller position, what lets go? What gets easier, right? And do you find overall that this upright position, after exploring one kind of slump and the other kind of slump, do you actually find that just being upright is getting maybe a little simpler? Now, just one more thing, you probably guessed it, but just to show, you can also do that walking pattern in that non-habitual slump. So if I walk towards the camera and I'm just walking backwards again, I'm sort of wired up so you can hear me, but you could take a walk down the block like this, right? This is not my normal walking rhythm. It's something funny, and I'm just feeling totally different sensations through my ribs and everywhere, and then I just come back to my normal standing. So again, the basic process is to stand upright. You can think of your head floating up, and then think of the head falling off the top of the spine to slump. But again, you don't have to make it a huge, egregious kind of a thing, just a little bit, just enough to notice, which way do I turn? Where do I tilt? Where do I contract? Where do I let go, right? And you do that and you come back. You can explore it in walking, both the sort of more upright walking or a sort of a slumped walking. and then you do it to the other side, knowing that that other side is really foreign to what you normally do. And then just find out, is there something about staying upright that's been refreshed? And if you are someone who meditates and you're going to be sitting for 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long you meditate, of course the slump can kind of creep in during the meditation, but maybe this process will help you begin to recognize how that's happening just a little bit sooner so that you can reverse it and find a better upright posture. If you haven't seen the earlier videos I did about, in particular, avoiding back pain while in sitting meditation, there's some additional information about how you work with the position of your pelvis that's really crucial, that will help you. But building on that, just what we've done here, recognizing your particular pattern, it's another layer that you can put in your toolkit that I think is going to help you to spend more time comfortably upright. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like more support from me, you can check the link below to find out about my one-on-one coaching, or check out some of the other videos on this channel, or movewithseth.com. So any questions, leave them below. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.